We're continuing with our series on autosuggestion in spiritual healing. Autosuggestion in spiritual healing. Autosuggestion as used in scientific prayer. Autosuggestion as used in scientific prayer. And we've covered 4 lessons and 1 guided meditation. And tonight, lesson will be session 5 with a new topic, but the same subject. Autosuggestion as used in spiritual prayer, as used in scientific prayer. Autosuggestion in spiritual healing, part 5. Part 1, the topic was autosuggestion, the engine in prayer, in scientific prayer. And the working theme was autosuggestion, what it is. We defined and gave the meaning of autosuggestion, the spiritual meaning in the context that we're using it in spiritual healing and in scientific prayer. Part 2, our topic was scientific prayer and the automobile. What I did was use presented the teaching in the form of an analogy or comparison of scientific prayer and the automobile. So it was an analogy, a comparison. And part 3, the topic was how God does it for you through the instinctive man, that is a part of you, that is in you, that was before you. And the emphasis on for. The emphasis was spending time on clarifying what it means when we say God won't do it for you. Well, that's not accurate. God will do it for you, but only through you, but can do it only through you. How God does it for you was the concentration of the lesson. And God does it for you, we stressed and clarified, through the instinctive man in you, and that is done through the art of, instrument of, device of autosuggestion. That's how. Part 4, the topic was the 3 aspects of autosuggestion. And we taught it through the aspects of comparing it to the machine, an engine, and an engineer. How God works through these 3 aspects in spiritual healing, in scientific prayer, analogizing the machine to the conscious mind, the engine to the subconscious mind, and the engineer to God through the Holy Spirit or intuition that is doing the work. The machine, the engine, and the engineer. Part 5, that's tonight. We're talking about the 3 classes of autosuggestion. And the 3 classes of autosuggestion, I will have you know that I am gleaning the teaching specifically from a 1909 or around that time edition of a book written by Herbert A. Parkyn, Parkyn spelled P-A-R-K-Y-N. And around the same time, and near the same time, that Émile Coué's book was written by Harry C. Brooks. And that book's the titles were the same, Autosuggestion. They both wrote books on autosuggestion. But this evening's lesson will be quoting from both of those books. But this particular subject, the 3 classes of autosuggestion, it says autosuggestion principally is drawn from Parkyn's work, P-A-R-K-Y-N-S. He talks about the 3 classes of autosuggestion as voluntary, that's 1, Involuntary, that's 2. And voluntary, involuntary, that's 3. That's the third type or third class. He calls them classes of autosuggestion. I think the term is important, not types, but classes. Autosuggestion, 3 classes. First class, voluntary. Second class, involuntary. Third class, voluntary, involuntary. Now, what I am hoping that you do is what I am doing, and that is training my mind. And the way that I am training my mind is by rereading and reviewing this handout. Of course, my handout does not look like your handout. My handout is extrapolated and expanded upon and growing and growing and going and reviewing and repeating and notes and adding to and until I change the tracks on that album, which is my subconscious mind. I am changing the tracks, and when by Thursday, Friday, or next week, this whole thing has changed. I have grown deeper and deeper and deeper to the understanding of these 3 classes of autosuggestion. I'm not stopping here. I want to go deeper. I want to go higher. I want to get this stuff from taught to caught. What are the 3 classes? But where I'm going with this is that so that this is that you are recognizing these classes of autosuggestion at work in your mind all the time. And you are deliberately and consciously directing your autosuggestion power, turning on the button so that it is working in one of these classes all the time, either voluntary, involuntary, and more so, how you can look at what's happening in your life moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month, and see the evidence of voluntary, involuntary, or voluntary, involuntary autosuggestions working in your life, because the evidence shows up. You can pinpoint, oh, this comes from voluntary autosuggestion. Oh, this comes from involuntary autosuggestion. Oh, this is happening because of voluntary, involuntary autosuggestion. And the more you practice this and live it 24 hours, then something shifts to where you gain greater control in the front and program your activity, the events of the outworkings in your life. And you know that it's happening by voluntary, involuntary, or voluntary, involuntary autosuggestions. Don't you love it? Do you know how long it took me to get into this sizzle here? All week long. But I love it. So that's why I almost didn't have it ready to come out of the oven for you tonight. So this is fresh out of the oven. So let's begin. Autosuggestion, as a little review here, is not an attribute, faculty, characteristic, trait, or any other part of the spiritual nature of God. So we're not presenting it as a religion or anything religious or anything like that at all. It is a term. That's what it is. It's a name of something, autosuggestion. So we only want you to have the feeling and the sense of autosuggestion as a name of something. It is the something that it is the name of that we are teaching. Let's get that in mind. We're not teaching about autosuggestion as anything, but the name of that we're describing and talking about. That's what autosuggestion is. Autosuggestion is something that you do not see, but you experience. And so the lesson on autosuggestion is all a description and explanation of what autosuggestion does and how it works as a facet of the faculty of God as imagination in man. Come on, we're talking about imagination, and we're talking about a faculty of God in man as imagination. Don't get away from that. if you do that, then you're running after shiny objects and you're being distracted just because, oh, we're talking about something new. Oh, no, 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 no. Autosuggestion, the only thing new about it is the discovery of by psychologists and present day new metaphysicians at that time, who began to understand the workings of the unconscious mind in a way that they had not discerned or experienced before. Let me change that: experience, identified before. They had not recognized it and identified that what Jesus was demonstrating as miraculous healings and marvelous works was as a result of the psychological state of mind of the individual, autosuggestion being a psychological experience. Autosuggestion is a description and explanation of a facet of the faculty of God as imagination in man, that. So we're focusing on what not autosuggestion as something that we need to learn about, but the thing that is working in autosuggestion. Autosuggestion is a description and explanation of a facet of the faculty of God as imagination in the man that can be used, autosuggestion can be used as a spiritual psychological agency to heal your life and control conditions. How? By the right understanding of the purpose and functions of the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind. It took me an hour to develop that statement, somewhere around 4 or 5 o'clock today. Autosuggestion is a description and explanation of a facet of the faculty of God as imagination in man that can be used. Autosuggestion can be used as a spiritual psychological agency. Agency, not the agent, but agency to heal your life and control conditions. How? This is where what Jesus demonstrated, by the right understanding. Come on. By the right understanding. And that is what you are getting here on Tuesdays and in your studies, particularly and specifically from these lessons. By the right, it is your right spiritual understanding, which is divine wisdom penetrating your consciousness. What is the right understanding of what? The right understanding of the purpose and functions of the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind in the individual. That's what autosuggestion is. Can be used as a spiritual psychological agency to heal your life and control conditions by the right understanding of the purpose and functions of the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind. That's what you are listening for going forward from now to the end of this lesson, and going back and reviewing from lesson number 1 all the way through. That's all we're talking about, is the unconscious mind. But we're talking about the conscious and the unconscious mind working collaboratively, but the emphasis on the lessons on autosuggestion is more on the conscious mind than on the unconscious mind than the conscious mind, without lessening the value or the importance of the conscious mind. But the emphasis is on the power of and the dynamic of the unconscious mind working in daily life. Well, John chapter 17, verse 5 says, and now, Father, see, Jesus, and there's chapter 17. That means 16 chapters have come before chapter 17. And this is at the beginning of chapter 17. And the verse starts off, and now. And Jesus was saying, now look here, God. Now, I've done all that you have sent me to do. I've accomplished this and I've done that, and I've taught and I've done it. And he listed all of the things that he had done. And then he said, and now. And so that's where we are today. We've been studying, we've been dedicated, we've been committed, we've been practicing, we've been meditating, we've been praying, we've been working. And we're saying, it's time for this stuff to demonstrate. It's time for this stuff to work. It's time for me to show up, change. It's time. But I know that this is going to happen only by your glorifying me, through your glorification, through your edification, through your teaching and training me, through your expanding my consciousness, through your revealing to me all that I don't know, that I don't understand. Lead me to a higher understanding, to practice this, to demonstrate this, to let my light shine. That's what he's saying. He says, and now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory but Jesus is on to something. He knows something. He's not talking about, knowledge, head knowledge and intellectual stuff and academic stuff. He's talking about, come on, take me deep. Let's go deep. Let's go deep. Let's go deeper into the light of God. I don't want to know nothing about what somebody else is saying. It's like Job. Remember what Job said back in the Old Testament he read? Job said, I had known by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye seeth thee. So we're not talking about what Ahman says or what the books say. From this point forward, you want God's glorification, God's edification, God's training and teaching, God's guidance. How so? That's what this lesson gets to the heart of. Watch right here is where he says it. Glorify me in your presence with. That's what we're talking about, that with the glory I had with you before the world began. If you are listening closely, you will hear that is the essence of the teachings that you are receiving. When you hear me talk about instinctive man, that's where we're talking about. When you hear me talking about the unconscious mind, and on the level with involuntary mind, the involuntary mind and the instinctive mind, that's the language that existed. And that was before the language and the understanding of conscious mind. See, the unconscious mind was before the conscious mind. The involuntary mind was before the voluntary mind. The instinctive man was before the self-conscious mind. Can you hold on to that? And understand that that's the wagon that I'm trying to get you to jump onto and hold on to. I don't expect you to get it all in one session, although this is what I've been talking about for 4 lessons, what I just said. What I just said is that this lesson is more about the unconscious mind than it is the conscious mind, yet the conscious mind is important and necessary. And what I am talking about is summed up in this scripture that I will reread. And now, Father, Jesus said in John chapter 17, verse 5, glorify me. That is what is happening through these lessons. You're being glorified in God's presence with what? The glory you had, not that Jesus had. Jesus said the glory I had. You need to put your name there and put yourself in that I. With the glory I had with you. What is the glory that you had with God before the world began? The glory you had with God before the world began was that you were instinctive man before you had self-consciousness, before you were consciously aware. You were living involuntarily. Your life was controlled involuntarily before it was voluntarily. That's what you're listening for through this lesson, this series. So autosuggestion is the self-induced, latent, divine, creative action of God that is produced by the acceptance and agreement of the conscious mind, which is spirit in man, and the subconscious mind, which is the feeling nature in man, working collaboratively. And so I had a chart here. You have to see what is presented to you in the form of 3 columns. The first column is spirit, soul, and then second column, third column, body. And under the column of spirit, I have seed, conscious mind, objective mind, self-conscious, word, thought, deed, idea. Parallel, going across the line under soul, I have soil, subconscious mind, unconscious mind, subjective mind, instinctive man, feelings, emotions, memories. And under body, I have body, plant, effect, world, individual, experiences. Now, and so Science of Mind, 1926, Ernest Holmes has a heading, Conscious Mind in God and Man. He says, in God and in man, there is a power that. What is that power? That is what we're talking about when we're talking about autosuggestion. We're talking about that power, that while it may not transcend law, it doesn't do away with the law, negate the law, yet it can be used consciously for definite purposes. It can be used consciously, and that is what we're doing with autosuggestion. We're using autosuggestion for definite purposes, consciously for definite purposes. But we're using a power, and autosuggestion is not the power. It is description of how we're using the power. So in God, this knowledge must be complete, but in man, it is, of course, but dimly perceived. We don't realize how much power is available to us, how much power we have, how much power we have access to through autosuggestion, through a simple practice as autosuggestion. Jesus, the wisest man who ever lived, said that God and man are one in real nature. And no doubt this understanding was what gave him his marvelous power. So much so that he declared, I and my Father are one. But he says, my Father is greater than I. The conscious and the subconscious are one. But the subconscious, the unconscious, is greater than the conscious. I and my Father are one, but my Father is greater than I. The conscious and the subconscious are one, but the subconscious, the unconscious, is greater than the conscious. Is what autosuggestion is about. And so in the book on autosuggestion by Émile Coué, or on the life of teachings on Émile Coué, in chapter 4, the heading is the nature of autosuggestion. And he's talking about autosuggestion as dealing with a force that is within you. A force. Autosuggestion is not the force, but it is, the lesson is on the power of thought as a force and how you use autosuggestion to direct it as an instrument, as a device, as a tool, as an agency. Being clear. The unconscious, Émile says, remember our emphasis is on the unconscious. The unconscious is the storehouse of memory where every impression we receive from the cradle to the grave is recorded with the minutest accuracy, like the grooves on an album. These memories, however, are not inert, inactive, or quiescent. They are vitally active. The sum of all these impressions is the man himself, is the ego, which is the form through which the general life is individualized. Ernest Holmes is writing in 1926. The outer man is but a, this is not, I said Ernest Holmes, Émile Coué is writing, because I'm working with the three books at once. Ernest Holmes, 1926, Parkyn's, 1909, and Coué, 19 something too. So they're all saying pretty much the same thing, almost verbatim. The sum of all these impressions is the man himself, the ego, the form through which the general life is individualized. The outer man is but a mask, the real self. The outer man is but a mask, the real self that dwells behind the veil of the unconscious. This is a loaded statement here, worthy to be repeated. The outer man is but a mask. See, you're wearing a mask. Something is masked within you, hidden within you, shadowed within you. And that is the instinctive man that was before the world was before the world began. You existed as the instinctive life, as the instinctive man before. And when we say, try to put that in the context of when in time, we're talking about periods, which means evolution. We're talking about the evolution of man. You evolved into a state of consciousness or self-consciousness. But before you were self-conscious or conscious, you were unconscious, man was. We're talking about periods and we're talking about evolution. Now, with that being stated, here is our problem. In the teaching, you can be distracted and run after a shiny object and not see that what I just said, we have to interpret metaphorically. We have to interpret symbolically. We have to interpret metaphysically so that we can see that we're not talking about something that happened eons of years ago or periods ago, eras ago. We're talking about what is happening in your mind and in your life right now. That we are unknowingly allowing our mind, our life to be lived and controlled by the self-consciousness, by the conscious mind, more than the unconscious self, unconscious mind, the instinctive life. And therein is our problem, separation, which the Bible calls sin. The outer man is but a mask. The real self dwells behind your real life, your real self, your real power, the real you dwells behind the veil of the unconscious. The unconscious is also a powerhouse. It is dominated by feeling, and feeling is the force. There's the force. Feeling is the secret. Feeling is the life. Feeling is the energy. Feeling is the dynamism. Feeling is the creative juice, the substance. Feeling is the source which impels our lives. What does impel mean? Drive, control, push our lives. Feeling does what? It provides, see, but it's from the unconscious. The unconscious. Feeling provides the energy for what? Conscious thought. Conscious thought has its place. It's important. Consciousness. Feeling provides the energy for conscious thought and action, and for the performance of the vital processes of the body, and for the performance of the vital processes of the body. The unconscious controls the performance of the vital process of all the organs of the body. Finally, the unconscious plays the part of supervisor over our physical process, over all of our physical processes. But you see, we think that it is the conscious mind that does all of this controlling and directing. No, it's just the inversion of that. It is the unconscious that is controlling our lives more than the conscious. And this was the new revelation or discovery it's called the Great Discovery in mankind over periods, but more particularly in the early 20th century, at the end of the 1900s, coming into the 20th century, is when psychology came into play, came into invention, and began to understand and that's when there were different theories and different postulations and different, many books began to be written about the understanding of the power of the unconscious. The power of the unconscious was giving more attention. This was a great discovery around that time. And so this is where we are today. It says, finally, the unconscious plays the part of supervisor over our physical processes. What processes? Such as digestion, assimilation, the circulation of the blood, the action of the lungs, the kidneys, and all the vital organs are controlled by its agency. What agency? The conscious, the unconscious, the power of the unconscious mind. Our organism, meaning your body, your life, is not a clockwork machine. It's not a clockwork machine, which once wound up will run of itself. Its processes in all their complexity, says Coué, its processes, your organism, your body, in all their complexity are supervised by the unconscious mind. It is not the intellect, however, which does this work, but the unconscious. It may be added that the unconscious never sleeps. During the sleep, however, during the sleep of the conscious, the unconscious seems to be more vigilant than during our waking hours. This is why it is so critical that you do prayer work, meditation before falling asleep as often as you can. And you're giving your unconscious mind directions. And those directions are going to come back through you because there's the in turn. In turn, when you awake, as soon as you're coming to your senses, you are receiving impartations and revelations and wisdom, direction, instructions from the unconscious into the conscious, and therein is your power and your healing. And then here comes the chicken or the egg. Which comes first? The seeds that you're sowing into the soil? Or did the soil give you the essence of those seeds before one? That's what we're reasoning and rationalizing and discussing and coming into an understanding of through these lessons. Where is the power? Who's in control? What is in control? What is the prime? What is the fundamental? What is the the primary. What is what is the true origin of words, ideas, and concepts in your life? Is it the conscious, from the conscious first going into the unconscious? Or is the conscious seeding into your conscious, unconscious into your conscious first? That's what we're questioning, asking you to meditate on and be open to understanding. He says, in comparison of the conscious and the unconscious, the powers of the conscious mind seem almost insignificant. Derived from the unconscious during the process of evolution, the conscious is, as it were, the entrance, where the crude energies of the unconscious are selected and adapted for action on the world outside us. I'm going to reread that because that was a little choppy, but it is explaining or restating what I just said. Derived from the unconscious during the process of evolution, the conscious is, as it were, the entrance where the crude energies of the unconscious are selected and adapted for action on the world outside us. In the past, we have overly exaggerated the importance of the conscious intellect. It wants you to consider the importance of the conscious mind, the conscious intellect. It says, but we have over exaggerated to the expense of not giving enough credit and due to the power and of origination in and of the unconscious mind, primarily or first. In the past, we have overly exaggerated the importance of the conscious intellect. To claim for it, the conscious mind or the intellect, the discoveries of civilization is to confuse the instrument with the agent. It's like attributing sight to the binoculars instead of to the eye that is seeing through the binoculars. It is like attributing what you see through the binoculars instead of attributing it to the eye that is seeing behind and through the binoculars. The value of the conscious mind must not be underrated, however. But the conscious mind is a machine of the greatest value, the seat of reason, social instincts, and so forth. But it is a machine and not the engine, nor yet the engineer. Remember, part 4 was the machine, the engine, and the engineer. But it is a machine and not the engine, nor yet the engineer. The conscious mind provides neither material nor power. These are furnished only by the unconscious, and we are not deliberately, intentionally, purposefully practicing the use of the unconscious mind with the diligence which we should be using and working with it, and more particularly in being aware, knowing, and understanding your spiritual understanding, what is working in your mind 24/7, 60 seconds out of the minute. It never sleeps while you are sleeping. And also when you awaken, what is the fresh manna from heaven, the dew that is on the roses you capture? And now your day is directed all through the day by the subconscious, the unconscious powers, being directed by your inner real self, your instinctive life. I call it the instinctive man. that is within you, guiding, guarding, directing you. Listen this way, that way. Listen, hear this, jot it down. Are you see here, there? What? These two levels of mental life are in constant interaction one with the other. Just as everything conscious has its, listen to this, just as everything conscious has its preliminary step in the unconscious, so every conscious thought passes down into the lower stratum. And there, this is autosuggestion. We're talking about the dynamics of autosuggestion. The two agree, and then something happens, and there becomes an element in our being. And that element in our being is autosuggestion, partaking of the unconscious energy and playing its part in supervising and determining our mental and bodily states. Reread it. Just as everything conscious has its preliminary step in the unconscious, so every conscious thought passes down into the lower stratum and there becomes an element in our being, partaking of the unconscious energy and playing its part in supervising and determining our mental and bodily states. That is the inner workings and dynamics of autosuggestion. That is what autosuggestion is, but autosuggestion is the name of what we just explained. So autosuggestion is a description and explanation of that force, that power that was just read about. Autosuggestion is just a term or a name of something, of the power, of the work. And the work I just explained. What is the work? Just as everything conscious has its preliminary step in the unconscious, so every conscious thought passes down into the lower stratum, and there becomes, see, that's acceptance and agreement, and there where two or more agree in my name, and there becomes an element in our being, becomes the thing, the goal, the desire that you're working with, partaking of the unconscious energy. Now that's the way, partaking of the unconscious energy, the plan, partaking of the unconscious energy and playing its part, bringing everything together, and in healing your body, supervising and determining our mental and bodily states. If it is a healthy thought that is in your conscious mind, we are so much better. If it is a diseased one, it's going to receive that, and we are so much worse. It is this transformation we call autosuggestion, an element of our life that we call autosuggestion. That's by Coué. Let's shift over to autosuggestion by the writer Herbert A. Parkyn, P-A-R-K-Y-N, 1869 to 1927. Born 1869, passed 1927, who wrote this material around 1908-09, near the same time that Coué was writing and working. They were working around the same period. He talks about the three classes of autosuggestion. He names them voluntary autosuggestion, involuntary autosuggestion, and voluntary involuntary autosuggestion. If this is your first time considering or reading or understanding or hearing about this, I don't expect you to get this in one hearing. I had to read it over and over and over. I had to meditate with it over and over and over. I don't teach it and try to articulate it until I think it is shifted from taught to caught. And when I know I have caught it, that's when I teach it or share it. But I realize that it is just the surface of knowing and understanding. I don't put it down. I stay with it. I will be staying with this for weeks because I see something here. And what I see in this is the power to heal yourself and the power to help heal others. And it says here, the word auto, he says the same thing that Coué, Holmes, and others have said. The word auto means self. The word suggestion means impression. Consequently, autosuggestion means self-impression. An impression made on one's self, or better still, an impression arising within one's own mind. This second sentence to me is more important than the first. You see, Let me reread it. And because it's talking about unconscious mind here, what you're listening for is the in turn, where after the impression is received, in turn, there is something that is given back through to the conscious mind. And that's what it's saying here. An impression made on oneself, or better still, see, better still. That's what I'm talking about. When he talks about the better still, is talking about the unconscious mind. Better still, an impression arise in the reverse, arising within one's own mind into the conscious mind. That's power. So the self-impression, starting off from the conscious mind, the self-impression may be made voluntarily. There are three classes of autosuggestion. The first class is voluntary, voluntarily. The impression may be made voluntarily. For instance, and here's an example of voluntary autosuggestion. For example, for instance, when one impresses his mind with the thought that he must arise at an early morning hour, this is an example of voluntary autosuggestion. This morning, I was awake somewhere around 4:30, and I began to do my work. Somewhere around 5:30, I felt sleepy, and there's something that I wanted to do and be prepared for by 7. So I reclined in my recliner, and I said to myself, with this thought in mind, that I will awaken by 6 a.m. So this was about 5:30 a.m. And so I did so. And at exactly 6:30, at exactly 6 a.m., I received what I thought was a text message on my phone, but it happened to be a notification at exactly 6 a.m. that woke me up at exactly 6 a.m. because that was the result of voluntary autosuggestion. The self-impression may be voluntarily. For instance, when one impresses his mind with the thought that he must arise at an early morning hour, this is an example of voluntary autosuggestion. This is from Parkyn's work. Now, Coué said, going back to him, going backwards and forwards, we are now in a position to formulate the basic law of autosuggestion as follows. Every idea which enters the conscious mind, if it is accepted by the unconscious, is transformed by it into a reality, and from henceforth a permanent element in our life. This is the process called spontaneous autosuggestion. Now, while I didn't include that name in the 3 classes of autosuggestion by Parkyn, which was voluntary, involuntary, and involuntary voluntary, I noticed that Coué uses none of these terms, but he does use the term spontaneous autosuggestion. And so I am choosing to put autosuggestion in the class of voluntary autosuggestion. I'm seeing his spontaneous autosuggestion as being the same as voluntary autosuggestion. And so it is a law by which the mind of man has always worked, autosuggestion, and by which all our minds are working today, whether involuntary, voluntary, or involuntary, voluntary, or spontaneous. It is working in our minds all through the day and all through the night at one level or another, or the other. Or the self-impression may be made involuntarily. He's shifting from voluntary autosuggestion to give you examples of involuntary or autosuggestions. And that will be followed by the 3rd class, involuntary, voluntary autosuggestions. We've just shared examples of voluntary autosuggestion. Now here are illustration examples of involuntary autosuggestion. or the self-impression may be made involuntarily, in which case it is the outgrowth of a sequence of ideas that have been unconsciously aroused by some external impression or by some thought or some real or imaginary bodily sensation. For instance, a New York visitor in Chicago looks at his watch, which is set an hour ahead of Chicago time, and tells a Chicago friend that it is 12 o'clock. You have two gentlemen standing here, one from New York, one from Chicago. And the New York visitor is there, and the Chicago person, they are on Chicago time, and tells the Chicago friend that it is 12 o'clock. A New York visitor in Chicago looks at his watch, which is set an hour ahead of Chicago time, and tells a Chicago friend that it is now 12 o'clock. The Chicago friend, not considering the difference in time between Chicago and New York, tells the New Yorker that he is hungry and that he must go to lunch. 12 o'clock is the Chicago man's regular lunch hour. And the mere mention of 12 o'clock is sufficient to arouse his appetite. This is an example of involuntary autosuggestion. Or a man may have another illustration or an example of involuntary autosuggestion. Now, the reason for slowing down and bringing your attention to this more deliberately is to get you to rise above these lessons and use it as a parable to look into your own life, mind, daily activity, and everyday thoughts, to recognize that what you are experiencing right now is an outworking or manifestation of either voluntary autosuggestion or involuntary autosuggestion or involuntary voluntary autosuggestion. The sum thought here is this: whatever it is, manifesting out of either of these classes, it is an element of being. It is an autosuggestion. That's the way Parkyn teaches it. He calls your condition an autosuggestion. He calls your problem an autosuggestion. He calls your fill in the blank an element as an autosuggestion. Or a man may have touched an article of clothing, for example, that he discovers has been worn by someone afflicted with a skin disease. And immediately he may begin to find itching spots on all over his body and imagine he has contracted the disease. These are examples of the effects of involuntary autosuggestion. Involuntary autosuggestion. The first was voluntary, now the involuntary. Great many phenomena that are attributed usually to intuition. Many problems and situations in your life that you have attributed to intuition can be traced to involuntary autosuggestion. For instance, a young child may take a dislike to some man who has spoken harshly or done some mean thing in its presence. The man and the incident may be entirely forgotten, but the impression is stored up in that wonderful storehouse called memories in the mind. After years go by, the child has grown to manhood. That child will carry a dislike for anyone resembling that disliked man that he had an experience with in his childhood. Ask a man who holds such a dislike as this why he should dislike a person to whom he has just been introduced, and he will probably say, "Oh, I cannot tell you why I dislike this man. I only know that I do. I guess it's intuition." Now, This dislike is certainly not intuitive, says the writer. It is the result of involuntary autosuggestion, which has arisen from stored up impressions of childhood that have been aroused by a sequence of unconscious thoughts started into activity by the general appearance of the new acquaintance. Such dislikes, as a general rule, are very strong no matter how unjust, and we all entertain them in some form or other. Would it not be interesting, he closes, if we could determine what an important part these early impressions of childhood play in our lives today as the source and the cause behind all of our maladies and inharmonies and problems in life are direct manifestations and expressions of involuntary autosuggestions of our own. That's what's being said here. The third class, another form of autosuggestion, we've talked about the voluntary or spontaneous autosuggestion, involuntary autosuggestion, and this one he is presenting as the most practical, the most common, the most obvious, and the most evident, the one that produces more clear evidence than the first two. There is still another form of autosuggestion, which I have called, Parkyn says, involuntary, voluntary autosuggestion. This term may seem paradoxical at first, but a couple of illustrations will serve to show that I have used this term correctly. A physician describes medicine for a nervous, sleepless patient, for example, with instructions that a dose is to be taken every 2 hours. Now, this person can't sleep. The physician gives him a prescription with instructions to take a dose every 2 hours. We're talking about involuntary, voluntary autosuggestions. Now, the patient may never have heard of autosuggestion, but this is the mental process he goes through unconsciously through the involuntary process whenever he takes a dose of the medicine. And when he takes the dose of the medicine, in his mind, he is assuming and saying and believing and knowing, quote, I am taking this medicine to quiet my nerves and enable me to sleep soundly tonight. So when you take medicine with a prescription, then you're taking it with a purpose that is given to the unconscious mind. I am taking this medicine to quiet my nerves and enable me to sleep soundly tonight. And I'm going to skip I have to go ahead and read this next part. It's just, or a patient has sent a remittance and a payment for a month's absent treatment to a practitioner or a healer who may be thousands of miles away. Having received an acknowledgement of the receipt of the remittance or payment and instructions to place himself in a receptive attitude at a certain hour each day to receive the telepathic treatment, the patient obeys the instructions, and at the appointed hour, he sits down or lies down to receive his share of the healing treatment, the thoughts. Now, the health thoughts come to him, whether the healer thinks of him or not, for they come in the form of involuntary, voluntary autosuggestions. Whether the practitioner or healing has sat down to work with the patient or not, the health thoughts come to him, whether the healer thinks of him or not, for they come in the form of involuntary, voluntary autosuggestions initiated by the patient. And if his trouble is constipation, for example, This thought comes to him as he settles himself for treatment. I am now prepared to receive my absent treatment. It is done unto you as you believe, in other words. The healer's best thought is coming my way, is what the patient is thinking and repeating in his mind. The healer's best thought is coming my way and stimulating my bowels into activity. I want them to operate every morning, period. Thus, we have voluntary autosuggestions, the first example, taken involuntarily. This is the third example. Thus, we have voluntary autosuggestions taken involuntarily. We have voluntary, involuntary autosuggestions. Thus, we have voluntary, involuntary autosuggestions. And it is this form of autosuggestion that the practical healer, practitioner, suggestionist, meaning yourself, employs in order to obtain the best therapeutic results in persons or patients that are avowed skeptics towards suggestive therapeutics. And it is this form of autosuggestion that the practical healer employs in order to obtain the best therapeutic results in persons or patients that are avowed skeptics towards suggestive therapeutics. This is accomplished by giving the patient a number of things to do daily, such as sipping his liquids, for example. Having impressed upon the idea that obvious benefits will follow these simple practices, involuntary, voluntary autosuggestions arise within, and he is strongly influenced for good every time he practices his method, sipping the liquid, repeating his affirmation every day in every way, I am getting better and better, or looking at his pieces of ice dissolving in the cup. Having impressed upon him the idea that obvious benefits will follow these simple practices, involuntary, voluntary autosuggestions arise within. Something begin to be released within from the unconscious into the conscious, arise within, and he is strongly influenced for good every time he repeats his affirmation every day in every way. I am getting better and better. And every time he looks at his pieces of ice melting away in his glass of ice, he says, it's passing away, it's passing away. It's changing from a solid to a liquid, and this liquid will evaporate. When beginning suggestive treatment, the importance of recognizing these three classes of autosuggestion and making a careful study of employing voluntary autosuggestion should not be overlooked. In employing autosuggestion, it is well to have in mind some practical theory of the way in which its use produces results. Every day, in every way, I am getting better and better. As I look at the pieces of ice in my cup, the cup symbolizes my mind. The pieces of ice represents the problem that is dissolving, melting away, which is the belief that sustains the problem. It's melting away, as every day I am getting, every day in every respect, I am getting better and better. And so it is.